Well, hi everyone, and welcome to my latest overview slash review of a new UK Blu-ray limited edition release by 88 Films. In this case, we are looking at the 1982 Jackie Chan starring and directed film Dragon Lord. Now, this was one of the earliest films that Jackie did for Golden Harvest Studio. He previously directed Young and starred in Young Master, and a lot of people think that Dragon Lord is a sequel to that, but I'm not entirely convinced that it is. Yes, in both cases his character is called Lung or Dragon, but apart from that, they're clearly not the same character. I mean, in the previous film, he actually knows martial arts, whereas in this, although he's very athletic and gymnastic, his character doesn't really know how to fight per se. And as you can see in the top right corner of Kung Fu Bob's ever present cover art, in-sik, who was also in The Young Master, is also in this, and you can also see Sing, or Mars, as he's otherwise known. He plays a character called Mao, or Bull, depending on which version you watch. Now, as far as I can make out, this film wasn't massively successful when it first came out all those years ago. One problem was the film took so long and cost so much money, that it really struggled to recoup its costs. And there's also the possibility that audiences in Hong Kong at the time were starting to tire of the period setting and wanted something a bit different. But as we know, Jackie rose to the challenge, and with one of his next films by making Project A, which was set in a then unexplored period of Hong Kong history. So let's have a look at the back of the box, and you get the usual bit of little blurb about the film at the top, and notes that it has an entry in the Guinness Book of World Records for the most takes required for a single scene. And there's as ever, there's some stills from the film and something about a bit about what's in it, and note that there's the means of being able to watch a previously unreleased in the West work in progress cut, which contains approximately 15 minutes of exclusive extended / alternate footage. But if you're not, but it's also got the original Hong Kong cut as well, which is 96 minutes compared to the extended cut of 103 minutes, and for those who hanker for the classic Hong Kong export international dubs, the original dub from previous releases way back when is here as well, but you can still watch it in Cantonese with remastered subtitles. And in the case of the famous shuttlecock sporting match, you can actually watch the subtitles in two different ways. Now, one has pretty much everything subtitled for you, whereas if you want to have simpler versions so you can concentrate more on the action, as even though some people who are well versed with subtitles still struggle to be able to cope with something too extensive, then you can watch effectively simplified versions so you can concentrate more on the action if you're one of those who hasn't quite mastered the art of watching complicated scenes with subtitles in that regard. So thumbs up to 88 Films for managing to find a suitable middle ground. And let's have as with the other limited editions, there's this slip case, so we'll just remove that. The actual Blu-ray sleeve contains the same cover art as as on the sleeve, and the back is the pretty much the same content as on the back of the sleeve as well. Take a look inside, and it's another of those that has a reversible sleeve with the original art used in its original release in Hong Kong and the like. And I believe that Cantonese title is Long Suze, which I believe roughly translates to Dragon Master. I can only presume that they decided on Dragon Lord rather than Dragon Master to help differentiate it from the previous film, The Young Master. And one thing that will come as a bit of a shock to anyone who gets this is that although usually there's this little informative booklet in these limited edition prints, sadly that is not the case with this particular release of Dragon Lord. What you get instead are some limited edition postcards. So there are 4 of these. Yeah, 4. And this poster. The poster is essentially the same cover art as on the front of the Blu-ray sleeve. And another thing to note is that this release also does not have any audio commentaries, which is also a bit of a shame, because as well as Jackie Chan, Mars and Hwang In-sik, there are also quite a few other names that you may have heard of, as well as may not have heard of at the same time. I mean, there's cast members like Tien Feng, who had a prominent role in Bruce Lee's Fist of Fury. Chan Wai Man is also in this, and he's probably best known for being one of the 2 main villains whom Jackie fought in Project A Part 2 when they were trying to make that initial arrest in the tea house. Feng Fong, the father of Feng Hak-on, is also in it as the referee of the aforementioned shuttlecock match, and Feng Hak-on is also in the film. Both of them have sadly passed away. And other names you might also recognise are Tai Po, Benny Lai. Benny Lai is probably best known for being the deaf-mute super kicker from Jackie's Police Story 2. Corey Yun, quite often Jet Li's choreographer of choice. Mang Hoi, aka Randy Mang, and he's been in quite a few of Sammo's movies, and if you remember in Enter the Dragon, there was a point where a character called Parsons, was conned by Bruce Lee's character into getting onto a boat, and there's a point where Bruce Lee passes the rope to a little boy, and I believe that little boy was none other than the then little known Mang Hoi. And another thing that an audio commentary might have addressed is the fact that there's this rather amusing scene in which Jackie's character is having to recite poetry for his father, who's actually played by the aforementioned Tien Feng. And unless you really know what's going on, unless you really understood Chinese culture, you probably wouldn't get the whole scene as to why recital of poetry and so forth is such a key part of their culture. In fact, my understanding is from the previous Hong Kong Legends DVD release that some international prints actually lost that scene completely because it was deemed to be too confusing to non-Asian audiences, which is understandable. I mean, anything that requires a substantial knowledge of a particular culture is very unlikely to travel overseas, so it wasn't that unusual for overseas versions to be shorn of such footage. I mean, it's not too wildly alien to a Western audience, but there's still plenty to enjoy in it. But it's just you might feel a little bit left out compared to how it would have been if there was an audio commentary explaining just how much of a core of culture that poetry I believe was. But anyway, on to the disc. There's the disc itself, and the film is really, as ever, is up to 88 Films' usual standards of digitally remastering. As ever, it's a 2K restoration taken from the original 35mm negatives. So, as with the other releases, this film has never looked or sounded better. At least not in officially released versions in the UK. And there are even some additional details that I couldn't even see on the Hong Kong Legends DVD release previously. I won't go into some of them, as one in particular is a pretty major spoiler, so I'm not going to spoil it. As for the film itself, because of the troubled production and the fact that to my understanding, that Jackie would quite often shoot something and then change his mind, and which basically meant that all of what he decided not to include in the final print ended up in the bin. It's a bit of an uneven mix. It's not horrible, and it's far from some of the poor quality of the work he did while he was under the thumb of Lo Wei about nearly a decade earlier. But neither is it one of his greatest. I mean, the exchange with in-sik is a joy to watch, and it's actually quite interesting how Jackie manages to get around the fact that his character is not supposed to know how to fight, even though we all know that Jackie's fighting capabilities are very good indeed in real life. So another thing while we're talking about fight scenes, fight scenes aren't really so much of an integral part of Dragon Lord. It's more about athleticism and sporting events, or at least something akin to sporting events. And I believe that was also seen as too much of a departure to particularly enthrall audiences, even domestically. So that was probably another thing that led Jackie to do something a bit different when he came up with the massively groundbreaking Project A year or two earlier. But as the saying goes, you live and you learn. But despite its noticeable flaws, it's still got some great action and stunts in it. It's not necessarily the kind of action that you're necessarily used to. I mean, fair play for Jackie for even back then wanting to do something that he hadn't really done before. It's just unfortunate that it wasn't quite as successful as he perhaps might have liked. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully it won't be long before I do another overview/review. Taxi88 out.